The diner was nearly empty as Emma wiped down the counter, exhaustion weighing on her. Tips had been terrible, and rent was due in 2 days. Just then the door swung open, and a sharply dressed man walked in, his presence commanding, his suit worth more than her entire year's salary. When she handed him the bill, his wallet slipped open, and inside was a photo, her mother's photo. Emma's heart stopped. Hands trembling, she whispered, "Sir, why is my mother's picture in your wallet?" Before we start, like this video and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. Now let's begin. Emma's breath hitched as she stared at the familiar photograph tucked inside the billionaire's sleek leather wallet. Her mother's warm smile gazed back at her, frozen in time. It was impossible. Her mother had never mentioned knowing someone this wealthy, and yet here was undeniable proof that they were somehow connected. The man, oblivious to her reaction, calmly retrieved his wallet, placed a crisp $100 bill on the counter, and stood to leave. Panic surged through Emma. She couldn't let him walk away. "Excuse me, sir," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He paused, turning his piercing gaze toward her. His blue eyes, sharp and unreadable, sent a shiver down her spine. "Yes?" he asked, his tone indifferent, as if he had already dismissed her from his thoughts. Emma swallowed hard, her hands clenched at her sides. "That picture in your wallet, the woman in it, she's my mother." For the first time, something flickered in the billionaire's expression. A momentary hesitation, a barely perceptible shift in his stance. But it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by a blank mask of indifference. "You must be mistaken," he said smoothly, adjusting the cuff of his expensive suit. Emma's stomach twisted. She knew what she had seen. She had memorized every detail of that photograph since childhood. It was an old picture, one her mother used to keep in a small box with other memories she rarely spoke about. "I'm not mistaken," she insisted, stepping closer. "Why do you have her picture?" The billionaire exhaled slowly, as if debating whether to entertain her question. Then, without another word, he turned on his heel and walked toward the exit. Emma's pulse pounded. She couldn't let him disappear. This was too important. She rushed out from behind the counter, nearly knocking over a tray in her haste. "Wait," she called, her voice desperate. He didn't stop. Heart racing, she followed him out into the chilly evening air. The street was quiet, save for the hum of distant traffic. The billionaire approached a sleek black car parked at the curb, its driver already stepping out to open the door. Emma reached him just as he was about to get inside. "Please, just tell me how you knew my mother," she pleaded. He paused, his hand on the car door. For a second, she thought he might actually answer. Instead, he turned slightly, his eyes scanning her face. There was something calculating about his stare, as if he was trying to decide whether she was worth his time. Then in a voice cold and impersonal, he said, "I don't owe you an explanation." The words hit her like a slap. Before she could say another word, he slid into the car, and the driver shut the door behind him. The vehicle pulled away, leaving Emma standing on the sidewalk, stunned and breathless. She had so many questions, but only one thought echoed in her mind. Who was this man, and what was he hiding? Emma stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching the black car disappear into the night. Her heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in short, uneven bursts. The billionaire's words echoed in her mind. "I don't owe you an explanation." But he did. He absolutely did. If he had her mother's picture, there was a reason, and she was going to find out what it was. She turned back toward the diner, her hands trembling as she pushed open the door. The bell above jingled, but she barely heard it. The night shift cook, Greg, gave her a curious glance from the kitchen window. "You okay?" he called out, flipping a burger on the grill. Emma barely managed a nod as she walked past him, heading for the back room. She needed air. She needed to think. She leaned against the cool metal of the storage shelves, her mind racing. Her mother had passed away 5 years ago. A stroke, sudden and cruel, had taken her life, leaving Emma alone in the world. There had been no long-lost friends, no mysterious figures at the funeral. Just a few of her mother's co-workers and neighbors. Nothing to suggest that she had ever known someone as powerful as the man who had just walked out of the diner. Emma squeezed her eyes shut, trying to control the overwhelming flood of emotions. She had always believed she knew everything about her mother, But what if she had been wrong? What if there was a past her mother had never spoken about? Her gaze fell on her purse and sitting on the small break table. She grabbed it and pulled out her phone, quickly searching for billionaire CEOs in the city. It didn't take long to find him. His name was Alexander Pierce, owner of a massive real estate empire, a man worth billions. Emma stared at his picture on the screen, her stomach tightening. Why would someone like him have a picture of a woman who had worked as a nurse in a small community clinic? The two of them couldn't have been from more different worlds. A sinking feeling settled in her chest. She had to find out the truth. The next morning she made a decision. She wasn't going to sit back and let this mystery eat away at her. She needed answers, and she knew exactly where to start. Emma took the first bus downtown, gripping her bag tightly as she stared out the window. She had spent the entire night searching for information, and she had discovered that Alexander Pierce's company headquarters was located in one of the tallest buildings in the city. It wasn't far. She could be there in less than 20 minutes. Her mind buzzed with questions as she approached the gleaming skyscraper. The moment she stepped inside, she felt out of place. The lobby was massive, filled with well-dressed professionals who barely spared her a glance. She walked up to the reception desk, trying to steady her nerves. The woman behind the counter, impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit, glanced up at her with a polite but distant smile. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" Emma's throat went dry. She had no plan, no excuse, just the burning need for answers. I I need to see Alexander Pierce," she said. The receptionist's polite smile didn't falter, but her expression cooled. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Pierce doesn't take walk-in meetings. Do you have an appointment?" Emma hesitated. "No, but it's important. It's personal." The woman's fingers tapped lightly against the desk. "Unfortunately, Mr. Pierce's schedule is full. If you'd like, I can direct you to our corporate inquiry department." "No," Emma said quickly. "I just need a few minutes." The receptionist shook her head. "I'm afraid that won't be possible." Emma's heart sank, but she wasn't ready to give up. She took a deep breath and turned to scan the lobby. She wasn't leaving without answers. And if she couldn't get in the right way, she'd find another way. Emma stepped away from the reception desk, forcing herself to stay calm. She could feel the woman's eyes on her, waiting for her to leave, but she had no intention of walking out without answers. She had come too far. There had to be another way inside. Her gaze darted around the lobby, taking in every detail. Security guards stood near the elevators, their sharp eyes scanning the room. Employees with badges hurried in and out, swiping their cards at the turnstiles. She needed a way past them. Then she spotted a young man in a crisp suit holding a coffee cup and balancing a folder under his arm. He looked distracted as he walked toward the elevators, his attention on his phone. Without thinking, Emma moved quickly, falling into step beside him. Just as he reached the security checkpoint, she spoke in a confident whisper. "Hey, wait up. You forgot to send me that report Mr. Pierce wanted." The man glanced at her, confused. "What?" Emma gave him an exasperated look, hoping she sounded convincing. "The report. He was expecting it this morning." The man hesitated, his brows drawing together. "Oh, I—" Before he could finish, she smoothly stepped ahead, as if she belonged, walking right through the turnstiles as his badge activated the sensor. The guard barely glanced at her. She kept moving, forcing herself to breathe normally. The elevator doors slid open, and she stepped inside, pressing the button for the top floor. Her pulse pounded in her ears as the doors shut. She had done it. The ride felt endless. Each floor that passed only made her more anxious. What would she even say when she saw Alexander Pierce again? Would he throw her out? Would he call security? When the doors finally opened, she stepped into a sleek, modern office space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. Everything screamed wealth and power. A few assistants sat at their desks, typing away. Emma took a step forward, but before she could get far, a voice stopped her in her tracks. "Excuse me, miss." She turned to see a tall man in a dark suit approaching. His sharp gaze flickered over her, assessing. "You're not supposed to be up here. Do you have an appointment with Mr. Pierce?" Emma's throat tightened. She could lie, but she doubted it would work. So she did the only thing she could. She told the truth. "No, but I need to see him. It's about my mother." The man's expression didn't change. "Mr. Pierce is in a meeting." "Then I'll wait," she said firmly. The assistant gave her a long look, then exhaled. "Wait here." He turned and disappeared down a hallway. Emma's heart pounded as she stood there, uncertain of what would happen next. Minutes stretched endlessly. Then suddenly a door opened at the far end of the office, and Alexander Pierce himself stepped out. The moment his eyes landed on her, something flickered in his expression, something she couldn't quite place. But instead of looking surprised or angry, he looked resigned. He walked toward her, hands in his pockets, his movements slow and deliberate. "You just don't give up, do you?" he said quietly. Emma's fists clenched at her sides. "Not when it comes to my mother." A long silence followed. Then finally he spoke. "Come with me." Without another word, he turned and walked back into his office. Emma hesitated for only a second before following him inside. She was finally about to get the answers she had been desperately searching for. Emma stepped into Alexander Pierce's office, her breath catching as she took in the luxurious space. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the room in golden sunlight, and a massive mahogany desk sat in the center, neatly organized. The walls were lined with bookshelves, filled with expensive leather-bound volumes. It was the kind of office that belonged to a man who controlled empires. Alexander walked to his desk and leaned against it, studying her with a look that sent a shiver down her spine. There was something unreadable in his expression, something deep, conflicted. Emma swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "Why do you have my mother's picture?" He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "No," she said firmly. For a moment he was silent. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Her pulse quickened as he carefully took out the same worn photograph she had seen last night. He held it between his fingers, staring at it before turning it around for her to see. Emma's throat tightened as she looked at the picture again. Her mother younger, smiling. But now as she looked closer, something struck her, something she hadn't noticed before. She pointed to the edge of the photograph, where a small corner was torn away. "This picture, it's incomplete. There was someone else in it." Alexander nodded slowly. "Yes, someone very important." Emma's heart pounded. "Who?" For the first time, his voice softened. "Me." She felt the air leave her lungs. The room seemed to tilt slightly as she stared at him, trying to process what he had just said. That doesn't make sense," she whispered. But as she looked at him, really looked at him, she saw it. The faint familiarity in his features, the way his eyes, though hardened by time, held something she had seen before. A painful realization settled over her. "You knew my mother," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander let out a breath, as if he had been holding it for years. "I loved her." Emma staggered back a step. "What?" His gaze didn't waver. "Your mother and I, we were once everything to each other." Emma's mind spun. This was impossible. Her mother had never spoken about him, had never mentioned anything about a man like Alexander Pierce, a billionaire, a man with power beyond imagination. "I don't believe you," she said, shaking her head. Alexander reached into his desk and pulled out a small old envelope. He handed it to her, his fingers brushing against hers for the briefest second. Emma hesitated, then slowly opened it. Inside was another photograph, this time a complete one. And there they were, her mother, younger, radiant, and beside her, a much younger Alexander Pierce, his arm around her, smiling in a way she had never imagined he could. Tears burned at her eyes. Why? Why didn't she tell me? Alexander's jaw tightened. Because I wasn't the man I should have been. Emma looked up at him, searching his face for answers. What happened? His expression darkened. I made a mistake, the kind that changes everything. She clutched the photograph, her knuckles white. Tell me the truth, all of it. He looked at her for a long moment, as if deciding whether she was ready. Then finally he spoke. It's time you knew who I really am, and who you really are. Emma's hands trembled as she clutched the photograph, her mother's face staring back at her. The weight of Alexander Pierce's words pressed down on her chest, making it harder to breathe. This man, This billionaire was tied to her mother's past in ways she had never imagined. And now he was about to tell her something that could change everything. She forced herself to meet his gaze. "Who am I?" Alexander hesitated, his jaw tightening as if he was bracing himself. Then with a deep breath he spoke. "You're my daughter." The words hit her like a thunderclap. The room blurred around her, her ears ringing. She shook her head, stepping back. "No, that's not possible." Alexander's voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable pain behind it. "It is. I've known for years, Emma. I knew the moment I saw you at the restaurant. You look just like her." Her mind reeled. Her mother had never once mentioned this. Not once. "You're lying." He shook his head. "I wish I were." Emma felt her knees weaken, but she refused to let herself fall. "If this is true, why didn't she ever tell me? Why didn't you ever try to find me?" Alexander exhaled slowly. "Because I failed her. I failed both of you." Her chest ached. "What did you do?" He ran a hand over his face, his expression tormented. "Your mother and I, we were in love. Young, reckless. But I was ambitious. I wanted more. Power, success, money. My family disapproved of her. They told me that if I stayed with her, I would lose everything. And like a fool, I listened to them." Emma's breath caught. "I walked away," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I left her when she needed me most. I thought I was making the right decision. I thought I could come back later, when I had built the life I wanted. But by the time I realized what I had done, it was too late. She was gone." Emma's vision blurred with unshed tears. "She left because of you." Alexander nodded, his expression filled with regret. "I searched for her, for years, but she didn't want to be found. She wanted to protect you, from me, from the kind of life I had built." Emma's throat tightened. "You abandoned her. You abandoned me." His eyes darkened with pain. "I did, and I have spent every day since regretting it." A long silence filled the room. The air between them was heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. Emma clenched her fists, her emotions warring inside her. She had spent her entire life struggling, watching her mother work herself to the bone to provide for them. Meanwhile, Alexander Pierce had lived in luxury, never once knowing the pain they had endured. She wanted to scream, to cry, to demand why he had let this happen. Instead, she asked the only question that mattered. "Why now?" Alexander stepped closer, his voice raw. "Because I don't want to make the same mistake again. I lost your mother. I can't lose you too." Emma's heart pounded. She had spent her whole life wondering about the father she had never known. Now he stood before her, asking for a second chance. But could she give it to him? Emma stood frozen, her pulse hammering in her ears. She had spent years wondering why her mother had been so secretive about the past, why there had always been a sadness in her eyes whenever Emma asked about her father. Now the truth stood before her, larger than life. Alexander Pierce, a billionaire, a man who had abandoned the woman he claimed to love, and now he wanted something from her. She swallowed hard. "You think you can just walk into my life and expect me to forgive you?" Alexander's gaze didn't waver. "Number, I don't expect that, but I have to try." Emma shook her head, feeling the weight of everything crash down on her. "Do you even understand what my mother and I went through? Do you know how hard she worked just to keep us afloat? She gave up everything. And you had everything." His jaw tightened. "I know, and I will never be able to make up for what I did." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "So why are you here? Guilt? Regret? You think throwing money at me is going to fix this?" Alexander's expression darkened, but not with anger, with something deeper. "This isn't about money. It never was." Emma scoffed. "Easy for you to say when you have more than you could ever spend." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I can't change the past, Emma, but I can give you the future you deserve." Her stomach twisted. "You think I need your help?" "I think you deserve the choice," he said softly. "Your mother wanted to protect you from me. I understand that. But she also kept you from knowing the truth. You were never unwanted. You were never forgotten. I loved your mother, and I would have loved you if I had known." Emma's breath hitched. She wanted to hold on to her anger, to push him away. But there was something in his voice, something raw, broken, and for the first time, she saw it. Regret, the kind that never fades. She looked down at the photograph in her hands, her mother's smile, Alexander's arm around her, a moment in time that had shattered into pieces. Tears burned her eyes. She's gone, and she will never know you said that. His voice cracked. I know. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Emma let out a shaky breath. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. Alexander nodded. I don't expect you to, but I will spend the rest of my life proving that I am not the same man who walked away all those years ago. She searched his face, looking for deception, for selfishness. But all she saw was a man who had lost something he could never get back. And for the first time, she realized, so had she. Her voice was barely a whisper. I don't know where to start. Alexander's lips pressed together. Then carefully he reached into his desk and pulled out a small velvet box. He placed it in front of her. Emma frowned. What is this? A gift, he said, from your mother. She left it with me years ago. She told me to give it to you when the time was right. Emma's heart pounded. With trembling fingers, she lifted the lid. Inside was a delicate silver necklace, and engraved on the pendant were three simple words: forgive, love, begin. A sob caught in her throat. Alexander's voice was hoarse. She believed in second chances. Emma clenched the necklace in her hand, her mother's words echoing in her mind. Maybe, just maybe, she could too.